Okay, hey guys, this is Pocket Reptile here. In this video I'm going to show you guys how to set up a corn snake terrarium. And as you can see, I have my terrarium already set up because it's a little hard to kind of set up everything the way that I like it. Once it's already out, it's kind of hard to get everything in position. So I'm just going to point out all the little details for you guys. And I don't know if you can see, but my corn snake is in her little log on the far left. She's kind of curled up. I guess she's kind of camera shy. But we're going to start with substrate. And as you guys can probably tell, I'm using what's called Eco Earth as my substrate. It kind of goes for a more natural look, I think. And what Eco Earth exactly is, if you don't know, it's basically just ground up coconut fiber. And there is a slight risk of impaction with using this kind of substrate, but for that reason I do not feed Noelle, my corn snake, in her terrarium. She gets fed outside of her tank so that there's no risk of impaction. And a lot of people like to use what's called aspen substrate. And in fact, I have a bag of it right here. Just this aspen snake bedding, just kind of shredded wood chips basically. That's another really good choice you guys can use. In fact, I used it before switching to Eco Earth, and I really like aspen because it's dust free and it holds its shape really well for corn snakes that like to dig and tunnel, and it's really easy to clean. So that's also a really good choice you guys can use if you don't want to use Eco Earth because it tends to be a little expensive. Paper towels or newspaper, you can also use those as your substrate. But personally, I wouldn't use them just because it's really easy for your corn snake to get underneath them and make a big mess or something like that. Although it is cheaper, so you can go with that if you want to save a little bit of money. But for the for the substrate, you should never use cedar or pine because they have a kind of chemical that kind of makes them a little damaging to your snake's respiratory system, especially since most snakes only have one functioning lung. So that's pretty important. They're really sensitive to things like that. And heating and lighting is very important. The most popular method of heating your terrarium would be an under tank heater. And you can't see it in the video, but underneath the tank, right under here, I have an under tank heater. And I use this green thing. It just kind of separates the under tank heater from touching this bookshelf thing. It's wood. Even though it's attached directly to the bottom of the terrarium, it's not touching the wood. I like to keep it on there as kind of a precaution. And you can see I've got these little, they're kind of small, but basically on all four corners I have these little things here. They raise up the terrarium to allow some airflow under there, which is really important. Because if you just let the tank lie flat on the heat mat, then there's a big fire hazard right there. So you want to let some airflow in there. It's pretty important. And you can tell I've also got a light up here. Lighting, like special lighting, isn't necessary. They don't need like special UV or anything like that. But mine's actually a heat bulb. And the only reason I have a heat bulb on mine is because my house gets pretty cold. My mom likes it really cold for some reason. So just to allow some extra heat, I keep a heat lamp on there. In fact, it should be in the center. You don't want to keep like a heat lamp directly on top of a heat mat because that can kind of lead to a buildup of heat and it can get a little too hot. It was supposed to be moved over. I fed her yesterday, so I always take the lamp off. So I forgot to put it back where it's supposed to go. But yeah, that's kind of like a supplemental heat thing. And what's really important is to have what's called a temperature gradient. And like I said, I have the heat mat on this side, but not on that side. Because this side is basically the warm side, and the other side is the cool side. And this lets her be able to choose where she wants to go. Say she's too cold, she can move on to the warm side and get warmed up. And if she's too hot, then she can move on to the cool side and get warmed up. Or not warmed up, she can get cooled down. So that's pretty important. Instead of just making the entire thing just one temperature. That's pretty important. But you should always have a rheostat or a thermostat hooked up to any heating elements, because like under tank heaters, they can get really, really hot, like over 100 degrees if they're not properly regulated, and that can really easily burn your snake, and you do not want that at all. In fact, one time I was leaving for a vacation and I was messing around with some of the cords, and I guess I accidentally bumped up my rheostat up to a higher setting, and when I got back, Noelle had a little burn on part of her underside. Luckily, it was not very severe, but that just shows you how important it is to get a rheostat or a thermostat to regulate the temperature of your heating elements. You can also use heat tape. I don't personally use it just because I don't use it, but heat tape is another thing you could use, especially if you're using like a tub, like a storage tub to keep your snake in. But you should never use hot rocks, because they get very, very hot, and I know a lot of people like to use them, but they just get way too hot. The only reason I would condone using one is using it with like not plugged in, not as a heating device, just as the plain cave. So yeah, but it's not optional to have a rheostat or a thermostat. They just get so hot without it. But on the cool side, it should be around the mid 70s in temperature degrees, and on the warm side, maybe the high 70s to mid 80s would be a good temperature range. Corn snakes, they're pretty hardy snakes. They don't need exact temperatures, but around that range is that's a good way to look at it. And that's kind of why I use the heat lamp, because my house gets so cold that even on the cool side, it's kind of like bare, like really low 70s going on to 60s, and I just think that's a little too cold for her. So I just kind of keep that on as a little bit supplemental heat, so it doesn't raise the temperature in there all too much, just enough so that it makes at least even the cool side just a little bit warmer, so it's a good temperature gradient for her. But for hides, kind of going back to the temperature gradient, you should have at least 2 hides, one on the warm side, which is this little cork log here, and one on the cool side. And you probably can't see it because I kind of made it hidden on purpose, but let's see, it's right here. I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. It's really hard to see, but it's an Exoterra snake cave, and it comes with sphagnum moss in it, so I also use that for a humid hide for when Noelle is in shed. But that's kind of her cool side hide, and even if it looks like it's more in the center, it's not directly on top of her heat mat, so it's like her cool hide. And that's why you should always have at least 2, so that way, say she's too cold and wants to get warm, bump the camera, say she's too cold and wants to get warm, she has a place to hide and get warm. And if she's too hot and then wants to cool down, she can still hide somewhere, kind of stay out of view and feel more secure, but be able to cool down. Let's see. And it doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Like you can see, I have like all the stuff that I bought, like actual pet supplies from pet stores and online. But it doesn't have to be fancy at all, especially if you're looking to save money. You can use stuff like empty tissue boxes. I've seen people make their own, but that kind of can get a little expensive if you're using like concrete mortar and stuff like that. Those little plastic bins that like butter and stuff comes in, you can get one of those, clean it out, cut a little hole in it. That can be a hide. And Noelle really, really likes these plastic wrap boxes for some reason. She likes kind of long, thin hides. She would always kind of curl up in there. But if you're going to do something like this, you guys know plastic wrap has those blades on it to help cut the plastic. I took that off and I just taped it all shut and poked some air holes in the top. And she doesn't use it anymore, mostly because she's just getting a little too big for it. But basically what I'm saying is you can use recycled stuff like that as hides. Paper towel tubes, she really likes those. She gets stuck in them sometimes, but yeah, they really love stuff like that to kind of play around in. But moving on to decor, corn snakes should always have something to climb on. If any of you have ever had a corn snake before, you know that corn snakes love to climb. Sometimes, like in the middle of the night, I wake up because I hear a thump, and Noelle, she climbs up here and somehow clings to the side all the way up along the top rim, and then she'll fall down. And she doesn't do it so much anymore, and I'm not giving her all these branches and little vines and stuff to climb on. But the point is, corn snakes love to climb a lot. And I've got 3 little tree branches in there for her to kind of climb around in. And I've got this big bendy vine. It's a Penplax climber vine. And it's kind of bendy, so you can bend it to any shape you want to, but it's also really secure. It holds her pretty well. And you can use branches from outside too, like say if you found a really cool little branch that you want to use for your tank, you can use that, but it has to be baked in the oven first to kill any parasites. I've never done that, so I don't really have any guidelines on what temperature or for how long, so if you want to do something like that, you might have to Google that, because I've never picked up anything from outside to use before. But you can use plants, and you can see I've done these little vines, and those weren't expensive at all. I got those from the Dollar Tree for $1 each. Obviously, I got 2 of them, and I think this kind of makes it look a little bit more natural. And actually, this part's supposed to be kind of like winded up around here, but I guess Noelle decided to do some redecorating. That'll be pretty common. And it's a little hard to see, but in the back I've got a little boxwood bush back there from Exoterra. So I don't have a green thumb, so that's why I don't use real plants. But if you want to do something like a bioactive, which is basically real plants, have little insects in the tank to kind of take care of any waste. I don't have any info on that, but if you want to do something like that, that'd be really cool too. Excuse me. But fake plants is the easiest way to go. I guess you don't have to worry about killing any plants or anything like that. But just kind of adding some decoration. It's not necessary at all. I just think it kind of makes it look pretty. They can climb on them. Like Noelle really liked climbing on the boxwood bush for some reason. And one of the most important things is a water dish. You can see it back here. And I think I need to clean it out a little bit. I see a little bit of eco earth in there. But it should always be on the cool side, because if you put it on the warm side, the heat from the under tank heater, it's going to make the water evaporate really fast, and you're going to be filling it up constantly, and it's just kind of annoying actually. But so it should always be on the cool side. And another reason to keep it on the cool side is because if it's on the warm side and water drips out of the bowl and onto the bottom of your terrarium, the heat stress, it'll cause the bottom of your tank to crack, and you definitely don't want that. So, and it's a good idea to make it big enough at least for the snake to kind of curl up in. Mine's a little smaller than that actually, because for some reason Noelle, even when she's in shed, she'll never go into the terrarium, I'm just messing up my words today, into the water dish. She prefers her humid hide, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I give Noelle bottled water, just like the plain bottled water that I drink. And you don't have to do that by any means. The only reason I do is just because I personally hate the taste of tap water. So I just don't want to give it to my snake, even though she couldn't care less. I spoil her. So I give her just plain bottled water. But like I said, it's not necessary to use bottled water at all. But if you want to buy lots of supplies for your terrarium, you want it to look nice, but you're a little bit low on cash, I would recommend www.snakemuseum.com. I'll put a link in the description below. And it's really good for buying decor and supplies, because they have like all the stuff that you would find at your local PetSmart or Petco or pet store of any kind. All the Zoom Ed, Exoterra supplies, all that good stuff. But they have the lowest prices. I know a lot of stores online and stores like in person will always say we have the lowest prices around, but they really do have the lowest prices. In fact, for three bags of Eco Earth, these little ones, or actually I ordered it as the biggest bag of Eco Earth they had, I would have had to pay $30 at my local PetSmart just for that. But for the exact same thing on snakemuseum.com, I only paid $12 plus shipping. So as you can tell, they have some really low prices for the same stuff that you would find at your local pet store. And I have their business card somewhere right here. They're actually a serpentarium. Move a little closer. It's centered in California, and not only is it a serpentarium, but they also have like a store to go with it. Here's the website, snakemuseum.com. Okay, but yeah, I would highly recommend them for setting up your terrarium to look kind of nice, and you don't want to use like empty boxes and stuff like that. But that's pretty much it, guys, for how to set up a terrarium. Oh, almost forgot. You can see right here I've got a little what's it called, a thermometer and hydrometer. That's pretty important so you can know how hot or how cold your terrarium is getting. And honestly, that particular kind that you see up there, that's actually not very accurate. It kind of tends to fluctuate a little bit, but at the time when I bought it, I didn't know that. But I would just recommend getting something maybe a little higher quality, and it might cost you a little bit more money, but it's definitely better in the long run, so you can tell just how hot or how cold your terrarium is getting. Excuse me, I've never talked to this much at once before. So that's pretty important. You can also use something like a temperature gun. I don't have one personally, but I'm trying to work on getting one, because I've heard they're pretty accurate when it comes to telling temperatures.